My name is Piper Novak, and I was standing outside a conference room door when my entire world collapsed in the most humiliating way possible. Through the glass wall, I watched my colleagues pop champagne bottles and laugh, while my manager, Quentin Ashford, literally pointed at me and made a shooing motion with his hand. His exact words still burn in my memory. "This meeting is for top performers only, Novak. Maybe next year you'll earn your seat at the table." The door clicked shut, and there I was, watching through glass as they celebrated the $2.2 million bonus payout for Project Phoenix, the same project I had spent 18 months of my life building, debugging, and perfecting. 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, canceled weekend plans, all for this moment, and I wasn't even allowed inside the room. Before I tell you how I made them all pay for that moment, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments if you've ever been excluded from something you helped create? Because what I'm about to share with you is the most satisfying revenge story you'll ever hear, and you need to hear every single word. Also, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and click that bell icon because stories like this don't come around often. Let me take you back to where this all started, because you need to understand exactly how I ended up in that hallway, watching my career crumble through a glass door. 2 years ago, I graduated from business school with a degree that cost me $80,000 and 4 years of my life. Unlike most of my classmates who immediately started hunting for six-figure positions at consulting firms, I did something that made absolutely no sense to anyone who knew me. I applied for an entry-level analyst position at Hartwell Technologies, a mid-sized software company that most people had never heard of. The salary was embarrassingly low, the work was mundane, and my friends thought I had lost my mind. But I had my reasons that nobody, not even my closest friends, knew about. See, I wasn't just Piper Novak, recent graduate looking for her first real job. I was Piper Novak Hartwell, granddaughter of Edmund Hartwell, the man who founded Hartwell Technologies 38 years ago. But here's the thing that makes this story so much more complicated. My grandfather died when I was 12 years old, and I barely knew him. My mother, Elena Hartwell, had this massive falling out with her father when I was just a baby. Something about him disapproving of her marriage to my dad, who came from what my grandfather considered the wrong side of town. Mom was so angry that she legally changed our last names to Novak, which was her mother's maiden name. She wanted nothing to do with the Hartwell name or the Hartwell money. Growing up, I heard whispers about my grandfather's company, but Mom refused to talk about it. All I knew was that somewhere out there was this business empire that should have been part of my legacy, but family pride and stubbornness had cut us off from it completely. When my grandfather died, Mom inherited his shares in the company, but she immediately put everything into something called a blind trust. I was too young to understand what that meant, but basically, she locked away her inheritance until I turned 25. She said she wanted me to make my own way in the world first, to earn my own success before I had access to what she called blood money. Fast forward to my final year of business school. I'm 24 years old, about to graduate, and I start getting these mysterious phone calls from a law firm called Peterson, Wade, Associates. Apparently, my 25th birthday was approaching, which meant the blind trust was about to mature. The lawyers explained that my mother had inherited 48% of Hartwell Technologies when my grandfather died. But here's where it gets interesting. My grandfather had also left me 20% directly in his will, bringing my total potential ownership to 68% of the company. 68%. That meant I would own a controlling stake in a company I had never set foot inside. The lawyers kept calling, wanting to schedule meetings, wanting to discuss my options, but I had this crazy idea brewing in my head. Instead of just walking in as the owner's granddaughter and taking control, what if I actually earned my place? What if I started from the bottom, learned the business inside and out, and proved that I deserved to lead this company not because of my last name, but because of my abilities? So I applied for that entry-level position under the name Piper Novak. During the interview process, nobody connected me to the Hartwell family. Why would they? I looked like any other recent graduate desperate for work experience. I interviewed with 3 different managers, including Quentin Ashford, who would later become my direct supervisor and the man who would ultimately push me toward the most satisfying revenge of my entire life. Quentin was one of those managers who seemed nice enough during interviews but revealed his true personality once you started working for him. He was the type of person who took credit for your ideas in meetings, who gave you impossible deadlines and then acted surprised when you struggled to meet them, and who had this annoying habit of explaining things to you like you were a child, even when you clearly understood the concept better than he did. My first 6 months at Hartwell Technologies were brutal. I was assigned to the data analysis team, which basically meant I spent 8 hours a day staring at spreadsheets and creating reports that nobody seemed to read. The work was mind-numbing, but I told myself it was temporary. I was learning the company from the ground up, understanding how each department operated, figuring out where the real problems were. And there were problems. So many problems. The company was profitable, but barely. Departments didn't communicate with each other. Projects took twice as long as they should have because nobody wanted to make decisions without getting approval from 5 different managers. The technology was outdated, the employees were demoralized, and the leadership seemed completely disconnected from what was actually happening on the ground level. But I also saw the potential. Hartwell Technologies had incredible talent, innovative ideas, and a client base that genuinely loved working with us. We just needed better leadership and a clear vision for the future. That's when Project Phoenix came into my life. 8 months into my time at the company, Quentin called me into his office and explained that we had landed the biggest client in company history. A healthcare network wanted us to build a custom software platform that would revolutionize how they managed patient data across their 12 hospitals. The contract was worth $2.2 million, and if we delivered successfully, it could lead to similar contracts with other healthcare networks across the country. The only problem was that our senior developers were already stretched thin with existing projects. Quentin needed someone to take on a bigger role, someone who could coordinate between departments and make sure everything stayed on track. He offered me the position, but with a catch. I would be doing senior-level work for my entry-level salary. I should have negotiated. I should have demanded a promotion, a raise, or at least some kind of official recognition. But I was thinking about the bigger picture. This was my chance to prove that I could handle major responsibility, that I could be a leader in this company. So I said yes. For the next 18 months, Project Phoenix became my entire life. I coordinated between the development team, the design team, the quality assurance team, and the client relations team. I created project timelines, managed budgets, troubleshot problems, and basically became the person everyone came to when something went wrong. And things went wrong constantly. The original timeline was completely unrealistic. The client kept changing requirements. Our senior developer quit halfway through the project, leaving us scrambling to find a replacement. There were weeks when I was working 70 hours, sleeping in the office, living on coffee, and vending machine snacks. But we were making progress. Slowly, painfully, but we were building something incredible. The software platform was going to be revolutionary, exactly what the healthcare industry needed. The client was thrilled with our progress, and word was starting to spread that Hartwell Technologies was capable of handling major contracts. Throughout this entire process, Quentin was taking credit for everything. In client meetings, he would present my work as his own ideas. In company meetings, he would talk about his project and his timeline. I kept telling myself that this was normal, that entry-level employees don't get recognition for major projects, that my time would come. My 25th birthday happened right in the middle of Project Phoenix chaos. I was so buried in work that I almost forgot about the blind trust completely. The lawyers called me 3 times that week, wanting to schedule a meeting to discuss my inheritance. I kept putting them off, telling them I was too busy with work. Which was true, but also, I wasn't ready to make that decision yet. The project was so close to completion, just a few more months, and we would have delivered something that would transform the company. I wanted to see it through as Piper Novak, the hardworking analyst who had earned her place on the team. Then, maybe, I would reveal who I really was. But Quentin had other plans. 2 weeks before the project was scheduled to launch, he called a team meeting. Everyone who had worked on Project Phoenix was there. The developers, the designers, the quality assurance specialists, even the administrative assistants who had helped coordinate meetings. Quentin stood at the front of the room with this huge grin on his face. "I have some incredible news," he announced. "The client is so impressed with our work that they're not only paying the full contract amount, but they're also giving us a performance bonus. An additional $300,000 that will be distributed to the team based on contribution levels." Everyone started cheering and clapping. $300,000 was more money than any of us had ever seen as a bonus. Even split among the team, it would be life-changing for most of us. But then Quentin kept talking. "Now, I want to be clear about how these bonuses will be distributed. This money is going to the people who really drove this project forward, the people who showed leadership and initiative, the senior team members who made the tough decisions and kept everything on track." I felt this weird sensation in my chest, like something was shifting, like I was about to fall down a very long flight of stairs. "The bonus meeting will be held tomorrow at 3 p.m. in Conference Room B. This meeting is for department heads and senior contributors only. We'll be discussing individual bonus amounts and planning our celebration dinner." After the meeting, I approached Quentin privately. "Will I be included in the bonus meeting?" I asked. "I mean, I've been coordinating this project for 18 months. He looked at me with this expression that I can only describe as confused, like I had asked him something completely ridiculous. "Piper, you're an entry-level analyst," he said. "Yes, you've been helpful with coordination and administrative tasks, but the real work, the leadership decisions, the client management, that's been handled by the senior team. This bonus is for people who took on real responsibility." Real responsibility. 18 months of my life, and he was calling it administrative tasks. That night, I went home to my tiny apartment and stared at the ceiling until 3 in the morning. I thought about calling the lawyers, about revealing who I really was, about walking into that office and firing Quentin on the spot. But part of me still wanted to believe that this was all a misunderstanding, that somehow things would work out fairly. The next day, I watched through that glass door as my colleagues celebrated without me. I watched Quentin raise his champagne glass and give a speech about teamwork and dedication. I watched the woman who had been hired as a senior developer 6 months ago receive a bonus for work that I had been doing since the beginning. And that's when I realized that earning respect and recognition wasn't about working hard or proving yourself. Sometimes, it was about having the power to demand what you deserved. I walked back to my cubicle, pulled out my phone, and dialed the number for Peterson, Wade, Associates. "This is Piper Novak," I said when the lawyer answered. "I'm ready to discuss my inheritance. How quickly can you prepare the ownership transfer documents?" "We can have everything ready by tomorrow morning," he replied. "But are you sure about this? Once you take control of your shares, there's no going back to anonymity." I looked toward Conference Room B, where my colleagues were still celebrating their bonuses for my work. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The lawyer explained the process. As majority shareholder, I would have the authority to make executive decisions without board approval. I could restructure departments, terminate projects, hire and fire management, basically reshape the entire company according to my vision. "There is one thing you should know," he added. "Your mother included a clause in the trust. If you choose to take control of your inheritance, you're required to hold your shares for at least 5 years before selling. She wanted to make sure you were committed to the family business, not just looking for a quick payout. 5 years. That was longer than I had planned, but it didn't matter. I wasn't thinking about selling anymore. I was thinking about building something better. That evening, I went home and spent hours researching corporate restructuring, executive decision-making, and shareholder rights. I read through every document the lawyers had sent me over the past year, understanding for the first time exactly how much power I was about to inherit. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and met with the lawyers in the parking lot. We signed document after document, transferring 68% of Hartwell Technologies from the blind trust into my direct control. Just like that, I went from entry-level analyst to majority owner of a multi-million-dollar company. But I wasn't ready to reveal everything yet. I had one more move to make. I called an emergency all-hands meeting for 10 a.m. Everyone in the company was required to attend. from the entry-level analysts to the senior management team. The email went out under my name, Piper Novak, which confused a lot of people since I was nobody important enough to call company-wide meetings. Quentin actually tried to cancel the meeting, sending out an email saying there had been a mistake, that entry-level employees couldn't call all-hands meetings. But then, he got a phone call from the company's board of directors, explaining that the meeting had been authorized by the majority shareholder and was mandatory for all employees. I've never seen someone look more confused in my entire life. At exactly 10 a.m., I walked into conference room B, the same room where I had been excluded just 2 days earlier. This time, every single employee was there, including Quentin, who kept looking around like he was trying to solve some kind of puzzle. I had asked the lawyers to wait in the hallway until I called for them. I wanted to do this myself first. The room was packed. People were sitting in chairs, leaning against walls, some even sitting on the floor. There were probably 60 employees total, and they all looked confused and slightly annoyed about being pulled away from their work for a meeting called by someone they barely knew. Quentin stood up as soon as he saw me. "Piper, I don't know what kind of joke this is, but you can't just call company meetings. This is completely inappropriate, and I'm going to have to write you up for wasting everyone's time." I walked to the front of the room and turned to face everyone. My heart was beating so fast that I could hear it in my ears, but my voice came out steady and clear. "My name is Piper Novak," I began, "but that's not my real name. My real name is Piper Novak, Hartwell." A few people in the room shifted in their seats. I could see some of them starting to make connections, their faces changing as they realized what that last name meant. For the past 2 years, I have been working here as an entry-level analyst while secretly owning the majority stake in this company. Yesterday, I officially took control of my 68% ownership, which makes me your new majority shareholder. The room went completely silent. Not just quiet, but silent in that way that only happens when everyone stops breathing at the same time. Quentin's face went through about 5 different expressions in 10 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, fear, and then back to confusion. "That's impossible," he said. "Edmund Hartwell's granddaughter would be." He stopped talking as he started doing the math in his head. 25 years old. Yes, that's me. I gestured toward the door. "I have 3 lawyers in the hallway with all the documentation if anyone wants to verify this, but I assure you, everything I'm telling you is completely legal and legitimate." The senior developer, a woman named Roxanne Flint, who had received a $15,000 bonus 2 days earlier, raised her hand like she was in school. "So you've been here for 2 years, watching us work, while secretly owning the company?" "That's correct. I wanted to understand this business from the ground up. I wanted to learn what was working, what wasn't working, and what needed to change. And over the past 2 years, I've learned quite a lot." I pulled out a folder that I had prepared the night before. For example, I learned that Project Phoenix, which we just completed, was managed almost entirely by me for 18 months, but I was excluded from the bonus meeting because I'm supposedly just an entry-level employee who did administrative tasks. Quentin's face was getting redder by the minute. "Now wait just a minute. You can't just—" "Actually, I can. As majority shareholder, I can do whatever I want, and what I want is to make some changes around here." I opened my folder and pulled out the first document. "Effective immediately. I am terminating the Project Phoenix bonus structure that was announced 2 days ago." Several people gasped. Roxanne looked like someone had just told her that her house was on fire. "Instead, I am redistributing those bonuses based on actual contribution to the project. The people who actually did the work will receive compensation that reflects their effort." I pulled out another document. "I am also implementing a new management structure. Anyone who believes in excluding team members from recognition will no longer have teams to manage." Quentin stood up so fast that his chair fell backward. "You can't do this. I've been with this company for 8 years. I have contracts. I have employment agreements. You have at-will employment just like everyone else, which means I can terminate your position at any time, for any reason, as long as it's not discriminatory. And excluding people from recognition based on arbitrary decisions about who deserves credit definitely qualifies as grounds for termination." I looked around the room at all the faces staring back at me. Some people looked excited. Some looked terrified. Most just looked stunned. But I'm not here to fire everyone and start over. I'm here to build something better. This company has incredible potential, but we've been held back by poor leadership and a culture that rewards politics over performance. I pulled out a third document, the one I had spent most of the night preparing. So here's what's going to happen. First, everyone who worked on Project Phoenix will receive bonuses that actually reflect their contributions. Piper Novak, the entry-level analyst who supposedly did administrative tasks, will receive the largest bonus because she coordinated the entire project for 18 months. A few people actually started clapping, which surprised me. Second, we're implementing a new performance review system based on actual results, not on how well you manage up to your supervisor. Third, we're restructuring our project management approach so that credit goes to the people who actually do the work. Quentin was standing there with his mouth open, looking like someone who had just watched his entire world collapse. And fourth, anyone who has a problem with these changes is welcome to submit their resignation. I'll be happy to provide excellent references for anyone who prefers the old way of doing things. The room stayed quiet for almost a full minute. Then, slowly, people started raising their hands with questions. "What happens to our current projects?" asked someone from the design team. "All current projects continue as planned, but with clearer accountability and fairer recognition." "What about the management structure?" asked someone else. "We'll be promoting based on merit and leadership ability, not on how long you've been here or how well you play office politics." "What about salaries?" asked a voice from the back. "I'll be conducting a comprehensive salary review to make sure everyone is being paid fairly for the work they actually do." Hands kept going up. People wanted to know about vacation policies, about professional development opportunities, about long-term growth plans. For the first time since I'd started working here, people seemed genuinely excited about the future of the company. But through all of this, Quentin just stood there, getting redder and redder, until finally he exploded. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You can't just walk in here and destroy everything we've built. I don't care who your grandfather was. You're just a kid who doesn't understand how business works." The room went quiet again. Everyone turned to look at him, then back at me. I walked over to the conference table, where someone had left that champagne glass from the bonus meeting. It was still sitting there, with dried champagne residue in the bottom. "Quentin," I said, picking up the glass, "this represents everything that's wrong with the culture here. 2 days ago, you poured champagne to celebrate work that I did, while telling me I wasn't good enough to join the celebration." I set the glass back down on the table. "The difference between you and me is that I've spent 2 years learning this business from every angle. I've done data analysis, project coordination, client relations, and quality assurance. I've worked with every department, solved problems at every level, and earned the respect of my colleagues by actually doing the work." I gestured around the room. "You've spent 8 years managing people and taking credit for their accomplishments. You think leadership means having authority over others? I think leadership means making everyone around you more successful." Quentin opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. "So here's what's going to happen. Your employment with this company is terminated, effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks of severance pay and a neutral reference letter. Security will escort you to clean out your desk." His face went from red to white in about 3 seconds. "You can't fire me, I'll sue you, I'll take this to the labor board." "You're welcome to try, but you might want to check the employee handbook first. Creating a hostile work environment, taking credit for subordinates' work, and excluding team members from recognition are all grounds for immediate termination." I pulled out my phone and dialed security. "This is Piper Hartwell. I need someone to escort Quentin Ashford to his desk to collect his personal belongings, then off the premises." The use of my real last name clearly got through to him, because he suddenly deflated like a balloon with a hole in it. "You planned this whole thing," he said quietly. "You've been planning this for 2 years." "No, Quentin. I planned to earn my place here legitimately, to prove myself through hard work and dedication. You're the one who decided that my contributions weren't worth recognizing. You forced me to use the power I never wanted to need." Security arrived within 5 minutes. As they escorted Quentin out of the conference room, he turned back to look at me one more time. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is." After he left, I turned back to the room full of employees who were still trying to process everything that had just happened. "I know this is a lot to take in," I said. "And I know some of you are probably wondering if you can trust me, given that I've been keeping this secret for 2 years. A woman from the accounting department raised her hand. "Why didn't you just tell us who you were from the beginning? Why go through all this?" "Because I wanted to earn your respect, not inherit it. I wanted to understand what it was really like to work here, what the real problems were, what needed to be fixed. If I had walked in here 2 years ago as the owner's granddaughter, everyone would have treated me differently. I would never have learned what I needed to learn." Another hand went up. "What happens now?" "Now we build something better. We create a company culture based on fairness, recognition, and actual performance. We make this a place where people want to work, where good ideas are heard regardless of where they come from, and where everyone has the opportunity to grow and succeed." I looked around the room one more time. "The choice is yours. If you want to be part of building something better, I'd love to have you on this journey. If you prefer the old way of doing things, I understand, and I'll help you find opportunities elsewhere." The meeting ended with people buzzing with excitement and confusion in equal measure. Some employees came up to me afterward to ask more detailed questions. Others just left quietly, probably needing time to process everything. Over the next few weeks, the changes I had promised started taking effect. The Project Phoenix bonuses were redistributed fairly, with the people who had actually done the work receiving the recognition they deserved. Several managers who had been ruling through fear and politics submitted their resignations. New people were promoted based on their abilities, rather than their connections. The company culture started shifting almost immediately. People began collaborating more openly, sharing ideas without fear that someone else would take credit. Projects started moving faster because decisions were being made by the people who actually understood the work. 3 months later, we landed 2 more major contracts, worth a combined $4 million. Both clients specifically mentioned that they chose us because of our collaborative approach and transparent communication. 6 months later, employee satisfaction scores had increased by 40%, and our project completion rate had improved by 30%. But the most satisfying moment came exactly 1 year after that conference room meeting. We were celebrating the completion of our biggest project ever, worth $6 million. This time, the celebration included everyone who had contributed to the success. I stood up to give a toast, holding a glass of champagne in the same conference room where I had once been excluded. A year ago, someone told me that I wasn't good enough to celebrate our successes. Today, I want to celebrate all of you, because this company's success belongs to everyone who helped build it. Everyone raised their glasses, including 3 new team members who had been hired specifically because of their talent and potential, not because of their connections or their ability to play politics. To fairness, to recognition, and to building something better together. As we clinked glasses, I thought about that moment a year ago when I stood outside this room, watching through glass as other people celebrated my work. I had spent 2 years trying to earn my place through dedication and hard work. In the end, I had to claim my place through power and ownership. Sometimes the only way to get the respect you deserve is to have the authority to demand it. The best part of this whole story is that Quentin never did sue me. Turns out, when you actually document someone's poor management practices and exclusionary behavior, terminating their employment becomes pretty straightforward. And here's something that might surprise you. I never intended for this to become a revenge story. I genuinely wanted to prove myself the hard way, to earn recognition through merit alone. But sometimes the world forces you to use the power you have, especially when people refuse to recognize the power you've earned. I still work at Hartwell Technologies, but now I work there as myself, not as someone pretending to be less than she is. The company is thriving, our employees are happy, and we're building something that my grandfather would be proud of. The conference room where all of this happened now has a plaque on the wall that reads, "Recognition belongs to those who earn it, not those who claim it." Every time someone new joins our team, I tell them this story. Not as a threat, but as a reminder that everyone deserves to be valued for their contributions, regardless of their title or their place in the hierarchy. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been excluded from recognition for work you did? Have you ever watched someone else take credit for your ideas, your efforts, your sleepless nights? If so, tell me about it in the comments below, because I guarantee you're not alone. And if this story inspired you, if it reminded you that you have more power than you think you do, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their work matters, that their contributions deserve recognition, and that sometimes you have to stop waiting for permission to claim what's rightfully yours. Remember, you don't have to own the company to demand the respect you deserve, but it certainly doesn't hurt. Thanks for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next video. People like you shouldn't work here, she whispered, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she cornered me between the ice sculpture and dessert table. The company gala hummed around us, but her words created a bubble of silence. I stood frozen, champagne flute in hand, watching my boss's wife glide away with a satisfied smirk, leaving me alone with my shame and the remnants of a career I'd built from nothing. 3 years I'd spent as the financial strategist who saved the struggling investment firm. Working 60-hour weeks, I transformed toxic assets into profitable ventures while living in my modest apartment and taking the bus. Meanwhile, my boss purchased his 3rd vacation property and his wife renovated their mansion's east wing. What she meant by people like you wasn't subtle. I grew up in government housing. My accent still carried traces of my neighborhood. My clothes, while professional, lacked designer labels. I'd earned my position through merit, not connections or inherited wealth. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't quit. That would give her exactly what she wanted. Because what Tabitha Harlow didn't know was that I had already discovered something about their precious charitable foundation, something that would change everything. And in 3 weeks, she would come to me begging for help, not knowing I was about to take everything she valued most. If you're still listening, thank you for staying with me. I notice many listeners drop off before hearing how these stories end. But I promise, what happened next changed not just my life, but everyone at Landmark Investments. Stay until the end. You won't believe where I am now. My name is Alara Neves. At 32, I was the youngest senior financial strategist at Landmark. My colleagues called me the fixer because I could transform failing portfolios into gold. What most people didn't see behind my quick smile was the girl who grew up in East Side Gardens, sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with my grandmother and 3 siblings. I put myself through college washing dishes and cleaning offices at night. I graduated top of my class from State University, not an Ivy League school, but I earned every credit through pure grit. When Landmark hired me, I thought I'd finally crossed the invisible barrier. I believed talent and hard work were the only currencies that mattered. Preston Harlow, the CEO, seemed to value my contributions. In board meetings, he'd nod at my analyses and implement my strategies. The company's recovery over the past 3 years was largely due to my financial restructuring plan. The annual reports proved it. The numbers never lied. His wife, Tabitha, was another story. The first time we met, at a company dinner 6 months after I started, she looked at my outfit, a simple black dress I'd saved 3 paychecks to buy, and asked if I was one of the catering staff. When Preston corrected her, she'd merely raised an eyebrow and said, "How progressive of you, darling." I ignored these moments. I was used to being underestimated. Each slight just fueled my determination to prove myself through results. The night of the gala, I'd been excited. Our firm had just landed the Castleton account, a client I'd personally convinced to trust us with their $50 million portfolio. Preston had congratulated me in front of the entire team that morning. I thought, finally, I would be acknowledged not just for my work, but as someone who belonged. I wore a navy blue dress, elegant but affordable. I'd splurged on having my curly hair professionally styled. When I arrived, several colleagues complimented me. For once, I felt like I truly belonged in these marble halls. Then came the moment with Tabitha. She'd appeared beside me as I admired the elaborate ice sculpture of the company logo. "Enjoying yourself?" she asked, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Yes, thank you. The gala is beautiful." She sipped her champagne. Preston tells me you're responsible for the Castleton account. I worked on the pitch, yes. She glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. You know, I've been watching you. The way you try to fit in, with your discount store clothes and practice manners. I felt my cheeks burn but kept my expression neutral. Preston may be impressed by your little financial tricks, but this world, she gestured around the ballroom with her champagne flute, this isn't for everyone. People like you shouldn't work here. You don't belong, and everyone knows it. That's when she delivered those cutting words and walked away, leaving me frozen between the ice sculpture and dessert table. I wanted to run, to hide in the bathroom and let tears fall, but something hardened inside me instead. I watched her join a circle of society wives, laughing as if she hadn't just tried to destroy someone's dignity. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Instead of calling in sick or drafting a resignation letter, I pulled out my laptop and began researching. If Tabitha wanted to play the belonging game, I needed to understand what truly mattered to her. It didn't take long to find. The Harlow Foundation was Tabitha's pride and joy, a charitable organization that supposedly helped underprivileged youth. In reality, it was her ticket into elite social circles. The annual Harlow Foundation Gala was the highlight of the social season. Being on its board meant instant status among the city's elite. I dug deeper. Financial records showed the foundation was struggling. Donations were down. Expenses were rising. Their investment portfolio was poorly managed. And their annual fundraiser was just 6 weeks away. At work on Monday, I maintained my professional demeanor. I nodded politely when passing Preston in the hallway. In meetings, I presented my analyses with the same precision and insight as always. But after hours, I stayed late. Not working on company projects, but developing a plan that would change everything. Octavia Penn had been my first major client at Landmark. When she came to us, she was a tech entrepreneur with a promising startup and modest savings. 3 years later, after following my investment strategy, she'd sold her company for $75 million. We'd developed a friendship beyond the professional relationship. I called her Tuesday evening. Alara, how are you? How's life at the stuffy investment firm? Octavia's voice was warm and genuine. Actually, I'm calling because I've found an interesting opportunity, I said. How would you like to make a significant social impact while also gaining entry into the city's most exclusive circles? You know I hate those pretentious gatherings. Even if it means helping to reshape how charity is done in this city? There was a pause. I'm listening. I explained my discovery about the Harlow Foundation, its financial troubles, its potential, and most importantly, how it could be transformed into something genuinely impactful. The foundation's bylaws allow for a takeover if someone purchases enough of their debt and convinces the board they have a better vision, I explained. With your resources and my financial strategy, we could acquire it within weeks. And what would we do with it? Octavia asked. Transform it into what it claims to be, a true force for helping underprivileged youth, real scholarships, real mentorship, real change. This sounds personal, Alara. I hesitated. Let's just say I recently received a reminder that some people think success should remain exclusive to those born into the right circles. Octavia was silent for a moment. Send me the numbers. If they check out, I'm in. Over the next week, I reached out to 4 other clients who owed their financial success to my strategies. People who, like me, hadn't started with advantages. People who remembered what it was like to be excluded. By Friday, I had verbal commitments totaling $12 million, more than enough to execute my plan. I hired Dominic Reed, a brilliant attorney who specialized in nonprofit acquisitions. He'd grown up in the same neighborhood as me, but a generation earlier. He understood what I was trying to do without needing the personal details. This foundation has serious mismanagement issues, he said after reviewing the documents I'd gathered. The board has a fiduciary responsibility they're failing to uphold. We can use that. How quickly can we move? I asked. 3 weeks. Maybe 4. We need to approach current board members individually before making a formal offer. Make it 3, I said. Their annual fundraiser is in 6 weeks. We need to be in control well before that. At work, I continued performing excellently. Preston even called me into his office to discuss a promotion. You've been exceptional, Alara. The Castleton account alone justified a bonus, but your overall performance has been outstanding. I'm considering making you Director of Strategic Investments. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the recognition. He leaned back in his chair. Tabitha and I are having a small dinner party next weekend. Key investors, board members, you should come. I forced a smile. I'd be honored. Good. It's important for someone in a director position to develop the right social connections. I nodded, thinking of the papers Dominic was preparing at that very moment. The dinner party was at the Harlow's mansion, a sprawling estate with manicured gardens and a view of the city skyline. I arrived in a simple but elegant dress, determined to maintain my composure no matter what Tabitha might say or do. She greeted me at the door with a tight smile. Alara, how nice of you to come. Thank you for having me, I replied, matching her false warmth. Throughout the evening, she made subtle jabs. When I mentioned a restaurant I enjoyed, she remarked, how quaint. Preston and I prefer establishments with proper wine selections. When another guest complimented my analysis of emerging markets, she cut in with, Alara has such a unique perspective coming from her background. I smiled through it all, knowing what was happening behind the scenes. That very morning, Dominic had secured support from 2 board members of the Harlow Foundation who were concerned about the financial mismanagement. After dinner, Preston gave me a tour of his home office, showing off awards and photographs with celebrities and politicians. Impressive, I said, noting a picture of him and Tabitha with the mayor at a foundation event. The foundation gala? He said proudly. Tabitha's pride and joy. She's been running it for 8 years now. I've heard it's the social event of the season. Indeed, though between us there are some financial challenges this year. Nothing serious, he added quickly. Just cash flow issues. I nodded sympathetically. Managing nonprofits can be complex. Tabitha handles most of it. She has her heart in the right place, but numbers aren't her strength. He chuckled. Maybe I should have you look at their books sometime. I'd be happy to help, I said, the irony almost making me laugh. By the 3rd week of my plan, everything was in place. Dominic had secured commitments from 5 of the 9 board members. My investors had pooled their resources. The paperwork was ready. Then, just as Dominic predicted, Tabitha called me at work. Alara, she said, her voice strained with forced politeness. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, Mrs. Harlow. How can I help you? Please call me Tabitha. She paused. The foundation's fundraiser is in 3 weeks. We're facing some challenges. Preston mentioned you're good with numbers. Perhaps you could look at our books? We'd compensate you, of course. I savored the moment, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. I'd be happy to meet and discuss how I might help, I finally said. Wonderful. Tomorrow at Café Laurent? Say noon? I'll be there. I hung up and immediately called Dominic. Move up the timeline, execute everything today. Are you sure? We plan to. I'm meeting Tabitha tomorrow. I want the papers signed before then. That night, I barely slept. Years of being underestimated, of fighting twice as hard for half the recognition, of smiling through thinly veiled insults. It was all coming to a head. I arrived at Café Laurent 15 minutes early, choosing a table in the center of the restaurant. I wanted witnesses. I ordered a sparkling water and waited. Tabitha arrived 10 minutes late, designer sunglasses perched on her head, worry lines creasing her forehead. She sat across from me, placing an expensive planner on the table. Thank you for coming, she said, signaling for a waiter. I'll have a glass of the Bordeaux. When the waiter left, she turned to me with a practiced smile. Preston speaks so highly of your financial acumen. The foundation is having some liquidity issues. Nothing serious, but the gala is our major fundraiser, and we need everything perfect. We desperately need someone to restructure our finances before then. Would you help us? I took a sip of my water, letting the moment stretch. The waiter returned with her wine. She thanked him and took a sip, watching me expectantly. I smiled gently. Actually, I just bought the entire foundation yesterday. Her wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. The cafe went quiet. That's impossible, she whispered. The board voted unanimously this morning. I've already approved a complete leadership change. Her face paled as understanding dawned. Her social status, her charity galas, her position on every prestigious committee, all now under my control. You need not worry about people like me working there anymore, I said, placing money on the table for her broken glass. I'll be too busy running the organization. The foundation will announce its new direction tomorrow, focusing on educational scholarships for underprivileged youth from neighborhoods just like mine. Tabitha's mouth opened and closed, no words emerging. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. You can't do this, she finally managed. Preston won't allow it. Preston doesn't have a say. The board voted based on financial mismanagement. Did you know the foundation was missing nearly $300,000 in documented expenditures? Money meant for scholarships that somehow funded private jet trips and spa weekends? Her eyes widened. Those were necessary networking opportunities to secure donors. The IRS might disagree. Fortunately, the new management, me, has decided not to pursue an audit as long as certain conditions are met. A waiter approached with a towel, kneeling to clean the shattered glass. Tabitha didn't even acknowledge him. What conditions? She asked, her voice barely audible. I smiled. We can discuss those at the foundation offices tomorrow. 10 o'clock. As I stood to leave, she grabbed my wrist. You planned this. That night at the gala, you did this because of what I said. I gently removed her hand. No, Tabitha. I did this because it was the right thing to do. The foundation should actually help people, not serve as your social stepping stone. I walked out of the cafe feeling lighter than I had in years. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. That evening, my phone exploded with calls and messages. Preston, Tabitha, board members, social elites suddenly concerned about their foundation. I ignored them all except for one call from Preston. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded. My wife is devastated. I'm fixing a financially mismanaged charitable foundation, I replied calmly. Something you should have done years ago as chairman. If this is about what happened at the gala, what happened at the gala? I interrupted. Silence. Tabitha told me what she said to you. It was inappropriate, and I apologize on her behalf. But this, buying the foundation out from under us, this is extreme. This isn't about your wife's comments. This is about doing what's right. The foundation has helped exactly 27 students in 8 years, despite receiving millions in donations. That changes now. Alara, be reasonable. We can work something out. The promotion we discussed, I was thinking executive vice president with a substantial equity package. Are you trying to bribe me, Preston? Another silence. I'll see you at work tomorrow, I said and ended the call. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find Preston waiting for me. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, as if he'd slept poorly. My office. Now, he said. I followed him, aware of curious glances from colleagues. Once inside, he closed the door and turned to me. Name your price. Excuse me? To sell the foundation back to us. Name your price. I sat down uninvited. The foundation isn't for sale. Everyone has a price, Alara. Not for this. The foundation will finally fulfill its mission, providing educational opportunities to underprivileged youth. His face flushed. You don't understand what you're doing. The social connections, the annual gala, these things matter in our world. Your world, Preston, not mine. Is that what this is about? Some class warfare nonsense? I leaned forward. This is about accountability. The foundation claimed to help students like I once was, but instead funded your wife's social calendar. That ends now. He stared at me, then slowly sank into his chair. If you go through with this, your career here is over. I figured as much. I've already drafted my resignation letter. I placed an envelope on his desk. Effective immediately. His jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. No. For the first time in 3 years, I'm doing exactly what I should have done all along. I stood and walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Preston? Tell Tabitha I expect her at the foundation offices at 10. If she wants to avoid a public scandal about those missing funds, she'll be there. I walked out, head high, past curious colleagues and through the lobby where I'd once felt so intimidated. Outside, the morning air felt crisp and clean, full of possibility. At precisely 10 o'clock, I sat at the head of the conference table in the Harlow Foundation's main office. The walls were adorned with photos of past galas, Tabitha prominently featured in each one, surrounded by celebrities and politicians. Dominic sat beside me, legal documents spread before us. Octavia and 2 other investors joined virtually on the large screen at the end of the room. At 10:15, Tabitha arrived, followed by Preston and a gray-haired man I recognized as their attorney. "You're late," I said simply. Tabitha looked like she wanted to snap back but thought better of it. She took a seat across from me, smoothing her designer dress with shaking hands. "Let's get this over with," Preston said. "What do you want?" Dominic slid a document across the table. "This outlines the terms of the transfer of control. As you can see, we've acquired 75% of the foundation's outstanding debt and secured board approval for new management." Preston's attorney examined the papers, his expression growing grim. "This appears to be in order." "What are your demands?" Tabitha asked, her voice tight. I folded my hands on the table. "First, you will both resign from the board, effective immediately." Preston started to object, but Tabitha placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. "Second, you will publicly endorse the foundation's new direction at a press conference next week." "Absolutely not," Preston said. "Third," I continued as if he hadn't spoken, "you will return the $300,000 in misappropriated funds, which will be used to establish a scholarship program for students from Eastside Gardens." "This is extortion," Preston's attorney interjected. Dominic smiled. "No, this is an alternative to an IRS audit and potential criminal charges for embezzlement from a non-profit organization." The room fell silent. Preston and Tabitha exchanged glances. "And if we agree?" Tabitha finally asked. "Then we don't pursue legal action. The foundation is rebranded and redirected toward its stated mission. Your social standing takes a hit, but your freedom remains intact." Preston stood abruptly. "We need to discuss this privately." I nodded. "You have 5 minutes." They left with their attorney. When the door closed, Octavia's voice came through the speaker. "You're enjoying this a little too much, Alara." I smiled. "Perhaps. Remember our goal, transforming the foundation, not just punishing them." "Understood, but accountability matters too." The door opened and they returned. Tabitha's eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Preston looked defeated. "We agree to your terms," he said stiffly. "Good choice," I replied. What followed was a flurry of signatures and legal proceedings. By noon, the transfer was complete. The Harlow Foundation was now under new management. As they prepared to leave, Tabitha paused at the door. "You won't be able to run this place. The social connections, the donor relationships, they're built on personal ties. Without us, the money will dry up." I smiled. "That's where you're wrong. The foundation's new backers have already pledged. 20 million more than you raised in the past 3 years combined." Her expression faltered. "Oh, and Tabitha? The annual gala will proceed as scheduled. We've already sent out notices to all the usual attendees explaining the leadership change and new mission. I do hope you'll attend as guests. It would make the transition so much more seamless." Preston practically dragged her from the room as her composure finally broke. When they were gone, Dominic gathered the signed documents. "Congratulations. You now control one of the city's most prestigious charitable foundations." "We control it," I corrected. "All of us." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We restructured the foundation from the ground up. New mission statement, new programs, new staff, including several brilliant people who, like me, had been overlooked because of their backgrounds or lack of connections. The press picked up the story. "Investment prodigy takes over Elite Foundation, promises real change," read one headline. Another proclaimed, "Harlow Foundation scandal. Society couple ousted amid financial questions. Preston resigned as CEO of Landmark Investments the following week, citing personal reasons. The board, aware of the brewing scandal, didn't fight his departure. Through it all, I maintained my focus on the foundation's new direction. We established scholarships for students from underserved communities. We created mentorship programs pairing successful professionals who had overcome similar obstacles with promising young people. 3 weeks after the takeover, the night of the annual gala arrived. We kept the venue, an elegant hotel ballroom, but transformed everything else. Instead of celebrity entertainers, student musicians performed. Instead of champagne towers and caviar, we served excellent but reasonably priced food, with the savings directed to programs. Most importantly, we invited 50 scholarship recipients and their families to attend alongside the usual society crowd. I stood at the entrance, greeting guests in a simple but elegant gown. Many of the regular attendees came, curious about the changes. Some were clearly uncomfortable seeing teenagers from poor neighborhoods mingling with socialites, but others engaged warmly, seemingly relieved by the foundation's authentic new purpose. At 8 o'clock, Tabitha and Preston arrived. The room quieted as they entered. She wore a stunning gown that probably cost more than a year's rent for most of our scholarship recipients. Her smile was fixed in place, but her eyes darted nervously around the transformed space. I approached them. "Thank you for coming. Your table is near the front." Preston nodded stiffly. Tabitha's smile never wavered, though her eyes burned with resentment. "Lovely event," she said through clenched teeth. "So different. Change was overdue, don't you think?" Before she could respond, I was called to the stage. As I stepped up to the microphone, surveying the room filled with society figures and students from neighborhoods like mine, a sense of completion washed over me. "Welcome to the first annual New Horizons Foundation Gala," I began, using the organization's new name. "Tonight marks not just a rebranding, but a recommitment to our core mission, creating educational opportunities for all young people, regardless of where they come from." As I spoke, I noticed Tabitha whispering to Preston, her expression growing increasingly agitated. He placed a restraining hand on her arm, which she shook off. "Our first announcement tonight is the establishment of the Eastside Scholars Program, which will provide full college scholarships to 50 students annually from underserved communities." Applause filled the room, enthusiastic from some tables, polite but reserved from others. "Our second announcement," I continued, "is the appointment of our new board of directors, comprised of individuals who have demonstrated genuine commitment to educational equity." I introduced each new board member, accomplished professionals who had overcome significant obstacles. With each name, Tabitha's expression darkened. Finally, I came to the last part of my speech. Before I close, I want to acknowledge the Harlows, who led this foundation for 8 years. All eyes turned to their table. Preston managed a tight nod. Tabitha stared straight ahead, unmoving. Their presence tonight demonstrates their support for our new direction, and for that, we thank them. It was the perfect public humiliation, subtle, respectful on the surface, but devastating in its implications. Everything they had used to elevate their social status was now being used to elevate those they had looked down upon. After my speech, I mingled with guests, particularly spending time with the scholarship recipients. Their excitement and gratitude reinforced that every step of this journey had been worthwhile. Later in the evening, I found myself momentarily alone near the dessert table. Ironically, the same position where Tabitha had cornered me months ago. I felt a presence beside me and turned to find her standing there, champagne in hand. "Congratulations," she said, her voice low. "You've destroyed everything we built." "No," I replied quietly. "I've rebuilt what you neglected. There's a difference." "Don't pretend this isn't personal." I selected a small pastry from the display. "The foundation's transformation isn't personal. It's necessary." "And choosing Eastside Gardens for your first scholarship program? The very neighborhood you're from? That's not personal?" I met her gaze directly. That was personal. I wanted students from where I grew up to know that people like them absolutely should be here. In these rooms, making these decisions. She laughed bitterly. You think you've won? This isn't about winning or losing, Tabitha. It's about doing what's right. So righteous, she sneered. You know nothing about our world. I know enough to change it. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Preston is finished in this city because of you. Our invitations have dried up. Our friends are distancing themselves. For the first time, I felt a twinge of sympathy for her. Her entire identity had been wrapped up in social status and appearances. Build something real, I suggested. Something that actually helps people. People like you? She asked bitterly. People like all of us. I gestured around the room. We're not so different, Tabitha. We all want to matter, to contribute, to belong. She stared at me for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Not acceptance. Exactly. But perhaps the first crack in her armor of superiority. Without another word, she walked away, rejoining Preston at their increasingly isolated table. As the evening wound down, I stepped onto the hotel's balcony for a moment of quiet reflection. The city lights sparkled below, and I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Octavia joined me, handing me a glass of water. Quite a night. Indeed. So, she said, leaning against the railing, was it worth it? I considered the question carefully. Seeing those students tonight, knowing what this foundation will do for them, absolutely. And the revenge aspect? I smiled. That was satisfying too, I won't deny it, but it's not the part that will keep me going. What will? I turned to look back through the glass doors, where scholarship recipients were still chatting excitedly with mentors and donors, changing what belonging means in rooms like this. Octavia nodded. So what's next for Alara Neves? I'm starting my own investment firm, focusing on clients who want both financial returns and social impact. Need a primary investor? I laughed. Are you offering? Consider it done. She raised her glass. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, I echoed. The following Monday, as I worked in my new office setting up my firm, my assistant notified me of a visitor. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent, he said. I looked up to see Tabitha standing in my doorway. Gone was the designer outfit, replaced by a simple but elegant business suit. Her hair was pulled back, her face devoid of its usual perfect makeup. 5 minutes, she said. That's all I ask. Curious, I nodded to my assistant, who closed the door behind him. Tabitha remained standing. I've spent the past week thinking about what you said at the gala. And? You destroyed everything I thought mattered. Her voice was steady, her gaze direct. But watching you with those students, I realized I've never built anything real. I waited, sensing there was more. I want to work for the foundation, she said finally. Not as a director or even a manager. Entry level. I want to learn how to actually help people. I couldn't hide my surprise. Why would you want that? Because you are right. About everything. She took a deep breath. I need to build something real. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or hidden agenda. I found none. The foundation has a community outreach coordinator position open, I said finally. It requires evening and weekend work with families from underserved neighborhoods. The pay is modest. I'll take it. You'll report to the program director, Zoe. She grew up in public housing and put herself through college. She won't tolerate any attitude or entitlement. I understand. I considered her for a long moment. Why should I believe this isn't some elaborate scheme to undermine what we're building? Tabitha met my gaze steadily. Because you've already taken everything I valued. Now I need to find something new to value. Her honesty was surprising. Perhaps losing everything had forced a genuine reckoning. I'll call Zoe, I said finally. If she agrees to interview you, you'll get a fair chance. Nothing more, nothing less. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. As she turned to leave, I added, Tabitha, people will talk. They'll say you've fallen far. She paused at the door. Let them talk. For the first time in my life, I don't care what people say. After she left, I sat thinking about the strange turns life takes. I hadn't just changed the foundation or my own circumstances. I might have changed Tabitha too. Whether her transformation was genuine or temporary remained to be seen, but I had accomplished something more meaningful than mere revenge. I had created the opportunity for real change, for the students we would help, for the communities we would serve, and perhaps even for someone who had once believed people like me didn't belong. The ultimate revenge wasn't taking away what Tabitha valued. It was creating something so meaningful that even she could see its worth. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. Your support means everything. Like those students at the gala, sometimes we all need someone to believe we belong in spaces others try to keep us from. If my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of transformation. And remember, the most powerful response to those who say you don't belong is to create spaces where everyone does. The hot coffee splashed across my face and chest, burning through my silk blouse to the skin beneath. The pain was instant, but I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. Everyone in the boardroom froze, as if someone had pressed pause on reality. The dripping of coffee onto the expensive conference table was the only sound. "You're nothing but a worthless assistant," Garrison bellowed, his face inches from mine as spittle flew from his lips. "How dare you contradict me in front of the board? You take notes. You bring coffee. You don't speak unless spoken to." 12 pairs of wide eyes watched from around the table. Some looked horrified, others embarrassed, but none spoke up. None moved to help me as I sat there, scalded and humiliated. I slowly reached for a napkin and dabbed at the brown liquid soaking into my clothes. 3 years of careful planning had prepared me for moments like this. I just hadn't expected such a public display of his true nature. I stood up. "Actually," I said, my voice calm despite the burning on my skin, "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and held it up. But before I continue, you should know that everything happening in this room has been recorded for the past 3 years. The color drained from Garrison's face as I turned to address the board. "Gentlemen, ladies, I believe it's time we had an honest conversation about the future of this company. Before I continue my story, I want to thank everyone who's been supporting this channel. If you're finding yourself glued to this story, please hit that like button and subscribe. It lets me know you want more content like this, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, back to that boardroom where my life was about to change forever. My name is Eleanor Merritt, though everyone at Horizon Technologies called me Ellie. I was 32 years old when the coffee incident happened, with degrees in business and computer science that no one at the company knew about. I'm naturally observant, patient to a fault, and have a memory that borders on photographic all qualities that made me exceptional at my job and terrible at letting go of grudges. I hadn't always planned to work as an executive assistant. My dream was to launch my own tech company, focused on sustainable energy solutions. But fresh out of my undergraduate program with student loans looming, I needed steady income while I developed my ideas and saved startup capital. Horizon Technologies was a mid-sized firm specializing in energy management systems when I joined. The company had brilliant engineers but suffered from short-sighted leadership. I saw the potential immediately and thought I might learn something valuable before pursuing my own venture. Then I met Garrison Reed. As the CEO, Garrison had a reputation for being demanding. What people didn't say out loud was that he was also vindictive, manipulative, and took credit for others' work. He'd inherited the company from his father but told everyone he'd built it from nothing. I became his assistant through an internal promotion after his previous assistant quit without notice. Later, I learned she'd filed a harassment complaint that was buried by HR. "You're lucky to have this opportunity," the HR director told me with a plastic smile. "Many would kill for direct access to Mr. Reed." During my first week, Garrison called me into his office and made things clear. "I don't need you to think. I need you to do what I say, when I say it, how I say it. Can you handle that?" I nodded and played my part perfectly. The eager assistant, grateful for the opportunity, willing to learn. Inside, I was already calculating how to use this position to my advantage. For 3 years, I was the first to arrive and last to leave. I handled Garrison's schedule, his correspondence, his lunch orders, his gift selections for his wife and his girlfriends. I took notes in every meeting, organized his files, and became invisible in the way that only assistants can. Present, but unseen. Heard, but not listened to. What Garrison never realized was that I was listening to everything, learning everything. I understood the company's operations better than anyone because I saw all the moving parts. I knew which clients were unhappy, which employees were mistreated, which innovations were ignored because they didn't originate with Garrison. And I was planning. By day, I was the perfect assistant. By night, I was completing my master's degree in business administration and building connections with the very people Garrison had alienated. The first was Vivian Ortega, the former CFO. Garrison had fired her after she questioned some accounting practices that skirted ethical boundaries. I reached out to her 6 months after her departure, claiming I needed advice on my graduate thesis. Over coffee, I showed her my business plan. "You've identified gaps in the market that Horizon could fill but won't," she said, impressed. "Why are you still working there?" "I'm gathering resources," I replied honestly, "and there's still more I need to learn." Vivian leaned forward. "What if you had funding to start now?" That conversation led to many more. Vivian introduced me to investors who were interested in green energy solutions. With her financial expertise and my technical knowledge, we began building the foundation of a company that would compete directly with Horizon, but with a business model focused on sustainability and collaboration rather than short-term profits. Next came Rajan Patel, Horizon's brilliant lead engineer who quit after Garrison took credit for his revolutionary energy storage design. I found him teaching at the local university. "I remember you," he said when I approached him after class. "You were always kind, even when your boss was being impossible." "I'm still his assistant," I admitted, "but I'm working on something I think you'd find interesting." One by one, I connected with former Horizon employees who had left because of Garrison's toxic leadership. 6 key team members eventually joined what we called Project Phoenix, our company that would rise from the ashes of their broken careers at Horizon. We worked in secret for over a year. I continued performing my duties flawlessly at Horizon while building our competitor after hours. The double life was exhausting, but every time Garrison belittled me or took credit for my work, it fueled my determination. Then came a critical turning point. Garrison was invited to speak at the annual Energy Innovation Conference, but had a scheduling conflict with his son's graduation. Rather than miss the conference, he sent me to take notes, not as a participant, but essentially as his courier. "Just get the materials and information," he instructed. "I need to know what our competitors are planning." What he didn't know was that I had already arranged meetings with 3 of Horizon's biggest clients who would be attending the conference. Clients who had expressed frustration with Horizon's outdated approaches and lack of customer service. The first was Westbrook Industries, responsible for 22% of Horizon's annual revenue. "Eleanor," said Diane Westbrook, the CEO, "I was surprised to get your email. Does Garrison know you're meeting with me?" "Mr. Reed sent me to gather information," I said carefully. "I'm gathering what I believe is most valuable." Over the next hour, I listened to her complaints about Horizon. Then I showed her what Phoenix Energy could offer instead. By the end of our meeting, she was interested. "This is impressive work," she admitted, "but leaving an established company for a startup is risky." "That's why we're offering a phased transition with guaranteed benchmarks," I explained. "And our team includes the very people who created the technology you already trust at Horizon." Similar conversations with Global NRG and TerraSmart followed. By the end of the conference, I had tentative commitments from clients representing nearly 2/3 of Horizon's business. When I returned, I gave Garrison exactly what he expected: a report on competitors' presentations and new products. I also recorded his dismissive response. "This is useless," he scoffed, tossing my carefully prepared report aside. "Next time I'll send someone who can actually understand what matters." I smiled and nodded, knowing that what really mattered was already in motion. The weeks that followed were intense. Vivian secured our final round of funding. Rajan finalized our product designs. Legal prepared the client contracts. We leased office space across town. Everything was ready. We just needed the right moment for me to make my exit from Horizon. Garrison unknowingly provided the perfect opportunity when he scheduled a board meeting to discuss the coming year's strategy. He asked me to prepare a presentation on client retention, a topic he knew little about but wanted to appear knowledgeable on. I spent days creating a comprehensive analysis showing alarming trends in client satisfaction and identifying specific improvements needed to prevent client loss. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was giving Horizon one last chance to address the very issues that would soon cost them most of their business. The morning of the board meeting, I dressed with particular care in a crisp white blouse and charcoal pencil skirt. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings for courage. I carried a small recorder in my pocket, though the recording feature on my phone was also activated, redundancy being a lesson Horizon had taught me well. The meeting began with Garrison taking credit for my presentation, as expected. Then he opened the floor for questions. That's when Bernard Chen, the newest board member, asked the question that changed everything. These client satisfaction numbers are concerning. What specific steps are being taken to address their complaints? Before Garrison could answer with the talking points I'd prepared for him, I spoke up. If I may, Mr. Chen, I've included a detailed action plan on page 17 that addresses each area of concern. The room went silent. I had broken the cardinal rule. I had spoken without being asked directly. And worse, I had implied that I, not Garrison, had prepared the report. Garrison's face flushed crimson. Ellie is getting ahead of herself, he said with a tight smile. Those are the recommendations I've developed based on my conversations with key clients. Actually, I continued, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Those recommendations come from data I've gathered over the past year through client surveys and exit interviews. I turned to the page in question. You'll note that our 3 largest clients have all expressed similar concerns about outdated technology and poor response times. The plan I've outlined would address. That's when it happened. Garrison grabbed his coffee mug and threw the contents directly at me. The hot liquid splashed across my face and chest, soaking through my white blouse. You're nothing but a worthless assistant, he shouted. How dare you contradict me in front of the board? You take notes. You bring coffee. You don't speak unless spoken to. And there we were, back at the moment that would define everything that followed. I stood up, dabbed at my soaked blouse, and pulled out my phone. Actually, I said calmly, I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. I turned to address the board members, whose expressions ranged from shock to embarrassment to curiosity. For 3 years, I've worked as Mr. Reed's assistant while completing my MBA and a second master's in sustainable energy at night. During that time, I've identified 17 critical flaws in Horizon's business model that Mr. Reed has consistently ignored or dismissed. Garrison laughed, though it sounded hollow. Sit down before you embarrass yourself further, Ellie. I ignored him and continued. Last month, when Mr. Reed sent me to the Energy Innovation Conference, not as a participant but to carry his materials, I met with representatives from Westbrook Industries, Global NRG, and TerraSmart. The board chairman, Harold Morris, leaned forward. Our 3 largest clients? Why would they meet with an assistant? Because they've been trying to communicate their needs to Horizon for years, without success, I explained. And they've all now agreed to switch their contracts to my new venture. Garrison's face contorted with rage. What are you talking about? What venture? I smiled. The venture that's backed by Vivian Ortega, the CFO you fired last year when she tried to warn you about accounting irregularities. The venture that employs Rajan Patel and the 5 other team members you drove away with your bullying and credit stealing. I reached into my bag and placed a business card in front of each board member. Simple, elegant, with the Phoenix Energy logo and my name. Eleanor Merritt, founder and CEO. I didn't steal anything from Horizon, I clarified. I simply created something better. And I'm here today not just to resign, but to offer this company a chance to become our subsidiary before your stock plummets tomorrow when our launch and the client transitions are announced publicly. Garrison lunged toward me, but Bernard Chen and another board member grabbed his arms. You think anyone would choose you over me? He spat, struggling against their grip. They already have, I replied evenly. 64% of your clients have signed with us, effective immediately. The tension in the room was palpable as the implications sank in. Harold Morris wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. "Why tell us this?" he asked. "Why not just leave and let us find out when it's too late?" I looked around the table. Because unlike Mr. Reed, I believe in giving people chances. There are talented individuals at this company who deserve better leadership. My offer gives Horizon a path forward instead of inevitable bankruptcy. I walked toward the door, then turned back to Garrison, who had collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. "You have until tomorrow morning to accept my offer. After that, we become your biggest competitor with your client base already in our pocket." I gestured to my stained blouse. "Oh, and I'll be sending you the cleaning bill for this. Consider it the first invoice of many." As I closed the door behind me, I heard the eruption of panicked voices. Through the glass, I saw their faces, white with shock at the realization that the worthless assistant they'd underestimated had just become the most powerful person in the room. 3 years of being invisible had made me invincible. But my story doesn't end with that dramatic exit. The real challenge was just beginning. As I walked through the office for the last time, employees stared at my coffee-stained blouse with confusion. My assistant, Zora, yes, I had secretly hired my own assistant 2 months earlier, was waiting at my desk with a change of clothes. "How did it go?" she whispered as she handed me a garment bag. "Exactly as planned," I replied. "Call the team. It's happening." Within an hour, I was standing in the new Phoenix Energy headquarters, addressing the core team that had been working in secret for months. Vivian, Rajan, and 19 others looked at me with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "It's done," I announced. "Horizon has until morning to accept our offer, but regardless of their decision, we launch tomorrow." Rajan clapped his hands together. "At last. No more pretending our company doesn't exist." Vivian was more practical. "What was the board's reaction? Do you think they'll take the deal?" I considered this as I changed into a fresh blouse in the adjoining room. They were stunned. Garrison was furious, but Harold Morris seemed open to discussion. He's a pragmatist. He'll do whatever saves the company and his reputation. The next 12 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Our PR team finalized press releases. Legal reviewed contracts one last time. IT prepared to take our website public. By midnight, we were ready for either outcome, Horizon's surrender, or our full-scale launch as their competitor. I barely slept that night, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. 3 years of planning, of swallowing my pride, of documenting every misstep and missed opportunity at Horizon. It was all culminating in this moment. At 7:30 the next morning, my phone rang. Harold Morris. "Eleanor," he said, his voice weary. "The board has been in emergency session all night." "And?" I kept my voice neutral. "We need more time to consider your proposal." I had anticipated this. The terms were clear, Mr. Morris. Deadline is 8 a.m. "Garrison has been removed as CEO, effective immediately," he said quickly. "We're prepared to discuss a merger of equals rather than becoming a subsidiary." This was interesting, but not enough. That wasn't the offer. "Please," he said, and I heard genuine desperation in his voice. "We have shareholders to consider. Employees who had nothing to do with how you were treated." I let silence hang for a moment before responding. "I'll give you until noon, not as a courtesy to the board, but out of respect for the employees who deserve better than what Horizon has given them." I ended the call and turned to Vivian, who had been listening nearby. 4 more hours, I told her, but proceed with the announcements as planned. They need to understand we're not bluffing. At 9 a.m., our press release went out, announcing the formation of Phoenix Energy and our partnerships with major clients formerly aligned with Horizon. The industry news sites picked it up immediately. By 10 a.m., Horizon's stock had dropped 18%. At 11:30, Harold called again. "We accept your original terms," he said, defeated. "Horizon will become a subsidiary of Phoenix Energy." I allowed myself a small smile. "Have the paperwork ready by 2 p.m. I'll bring my team to your offices to sign." The return to Horizon that afternoon was nothing like my exit the day before. The reception area was hushed as I walked in with Vivian, our legal counsel, and 2 board members from our side. Employees watched from doorways and cubicles, whispering among themselves. In the same boardroom where Garrison had thrown coffee at me, Harold Morris and the remaining Horizon board members waited. Garrison was notably absent. "Where is Mr. Reed?" I asked as we took our seats. Harold cleared his throat. "He resigned this morning, with immediate effect." I nodded, unsurprised. "Then let's proceed." The signing took less than 30 minutes. Ownership of Horizon Technologies transferred to Phoenix Energy. The subsidiary would continue operations under new management, with a phased integration plan to minimize disruption. As we concluded, Harold asked to speak with me privately. The others filed out, leaving us alone in the boardroom. "I owe you an apology," he said once the door closed. "I saw how Garrison treated you and others. I did nothing." I studied him for a moment. "Why not?" He sighed heavily. "Complacency. Conflict avoidance. The quarterly numbers were good enough that I could justify not rocking the boat." "Those aren't reasons," I replied. "They're excuses." "Yes," he agreed. "And now I've lost my company because of them." I considered him carefully. Harold was in his 60s, with decades of industry experience and connections that could still be valuable. "You haven't lost anything yet," I told him. "You've just acquired new leadership. Whether you still have a place here depends on what you do next." He looked surprised. "You're not firing the entire board?" "I'm evaluating everyone based on merit and potential contribution, not past mistakes." I stood up. "Send me a proposal for how you think you can add value to Phoenix Energy going forward. I'll review it like any other business proposal." As I turned to leave, he called after me. "Eleanor, how did you do it? How did you work for him for 3 years without letting on what you were planning?" I paused at the door. "I learned something valuable from my time here, Mr. Morris. People see what they expect to see." Garrison expected to see a grateful, subservient assistant, so that's what I showed him. He never looked deeper because he never believed I could be more than what he defined me as. "And now you own his company," Harold said with a hint of admiration. "No," I corrected him. "I built my own company. Horizon is just an acquisition." In the weeks that followed, we implemented our integration plan. I made a point of personally meeting with every Horizon employee to explain the changes and opportunities ahead. Many were understandably nervous, but others were visibly relieved to be free of Garrison's leadership. "Is it true what they're saying?" asked one engineer during a department meeting. "That you recorded everything while you were his assistant?" "Not everything," I clarified. "Just the important parts." The room erupted in nervous laughter. The transition wasn't without challenges. 2 of Garrison's loyal executives resigned rather than work under my leadership. A few clients who hadn't been part of our initial outreach expressed concerns about the sudden change. But our preparation proved sufficient. We had contingency plans for every scenario. A month after the acquisition, I received an unexpected email from Garrison. The subject line read simply, "We should talk." Against Vivian's advice, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant downtown. I arrived early and watched him enter. He'd lost weight, and the arrogance in his walk was diminished. "Eleanor," he greeted me, trying for his old authoritative tone but falling short. "Thank you for meeting me." "What can I do for you, Garrison?" I asked once he was seated. He studied me for a moment. "I underestimated you. Clearly." "Yes," I agreed. "You did." "I want to understand something," he continued. "Was it always your plan to take over Horizon? From the beginning?" I considered the question carefully. "No. Initially, I just wanted to learn the industry while developing my own ideas. But the more I saw how you operated, taking credit for others' work, ignoring valuable input, driving away talented people, the more I realized there was an opportunity to build something better. Using my clients," he said bitterly. "Using relationships I built while you were too busy taking them for granted." I corrected. "Every client who switched to Phoenix had tried to communicate their needs to you first. You didn't listen." He leaned forward. "I want to make you an offer." This was unexpected. "What kind of offer?" "I'm starting a new venture," he said. "With my experience and your tactical approach, we could build something significant." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're offering me a job after calling me worthless?" His expression hardened. "I'm offering you a partnership, equal stakes. I studied him, trying to understand his angle. Why would I consider working with you when I've already succeeded without you? Because I still have connections you don't, he replied, and resources you might find valuable. I took a sip of water, letting him wait for my response. Garrison, do you know why I recorded our interactions for 3 years? He frowned. Leverage, obviously. Protection, I corrected. I needed evidence of how you operated because I knew that someone like you would never accept defeat gracefully. You'd look for ways to retaliate, to reclaim what you lost, to prove you were still in control. His expression confirmed my suspicions. This meeting isn't about partnership, I continued. It's about you trying to find a way back in, to undermine what I've built. And that's never going to happen. I stood up. Enjoy your meal, it's been paid for. As I walked away, he called after me. You think you've won, but this isn't over, Eleanor. I turned back. Actually, it was over the moment you decided I was worthless. You just didn't know it yet. 6 months after the acquisition, Phoenix Energy was flourishing. We'd retained 92% of Horizon's valuable employees while creating a healthier work culture. Our client base had expanded beyond the energy sector into broader sustainability initiatives. Rajan's innovations were receiving industry recognition, and Vivian had streamlined our operations into a model of efficiency. I rarely thought about Garrison until Zora rushed into my office one afternoon. You need to see this, she said, handing me her tablet. It was an industry news site announcing Garrison's new company, Reed Innovations, with a focus suspiciously similar to Phoenix Energy's core business. The article quoted him directly. I'm returning to the industry with insights gained from watching others attempt to fill the void left by my departure from Horizon. I handed the tablet back to Zora. Monitor this, but it's not a concern. He's clearly targeting us, she pointed out. Yes, I agreed. And he'll fail because he still hasn't learned the right lesson. A week later, I received another email from Garrison. This one contained only a news release draft announcing that Reed Innovations had secured funding from a major investment group known for hostile takeovers. I forwarded it to Vivian with a brief note. Activate Contingency Plan Delta. Within hours, our legal team had filed preemptive protective measures for our intellectual property. Our PR department reached out to key industry journalists to highlight our upcoming innovations. And I personally called each of our major clients to reinforce our partnerships. 2 days later, I held a company-wide meeting. Some of you may have heard that Garrison Reed is attempting to re-enter our market space. I began. I want to address this directly because transparency is one of our core values. The room was silent. Everyone's attention focused intently. Garrison believes that business is about power and domination. His new venture is built on the same principles that led to Horizon's vulnerability, prioritizing ego over innovation, competition over collaboration, and profit over purpose. I clicked to the next slide, showing our growth metrics since the acquisition. Phoenix Energy exists because we believe there's a better way. We've proven that treating people with respect, listening to clients' needs, and focusing on sustainable solutions creates more value than the old model ever could. I looked around at the faces watching me, people who had chosen to be part of something new, something better. Garrison is looking backward, trying to recreate what he lost. We're looking forward, and that fundamental difference is why we'll continue to succeed while he struggles to gain traction. The applause that followed wasn't just supportive, it was determined. These people weren't just employees, they were co-creators of a vision. 3 weeks later, the investment group that had initially backed Garrison withdrew their support. Our industry contacts revealed that after conducting due diligence and speaking with former Horizon employees and clients, they'd developed concerns about Garrison's leadership style and business practices. The final chapter came unexpectedly. Harold Morris, who had indeed found a valuable role on our advisory board, requested a private meeting. I have information you should know, he said when we met. Garrison has been approaching Phoenix employees, trying to recruit them. He's focusing on people who worked at Horizon before, promising substantial signing bonuses. I nodded. We're aware. No one has accepted. Harold looked surprised. None? Not a single person, I confirmed. but thank you for the warning." He hesitated. "There's more. He contacted me as well." Now I was interested. "And?" "He wanted inside information about your operations, your strategy." He offered. Harold looked embarrassed. "He offered significant compensation." "What did you tell him?" I asked, curious rather than concerned. Harold straightened in his chair. "I told him that I'd made enough mistakes with Horizon by enabling his behavior, and I wouldn't make the same mistake with Phoenix." I smiled. "Thank you for your loyalty, Harold." "It's not about loyalty," he replied. "It's about finally choosing to do the right thing." The next day, I received a hand-delivered envelope. Inside was a brief note from Garrison. "You win. I'm leaving the industry." I didn't respond. There was no need. This had never been about winning or losing for me. It had been about creating something valuable, while proving that success doesn't require sacrificing ethics or dignity. 1 year to the day after the coffee incident, I stood at a podium accepting an industry award for innovation. As I looked out at the audience, I saw faces of people who had been part of my journey: Vivian, Rajan, Zora, Harold, and dozens of others who had chosen to believe in a different kind of leadership. "This award recognizes innovation," I began my speech. "But the real innovation at Phoenix Energy isn't just in our technology, it's in our approach to business itself. We've proven that listening is more powerful than dictating, that collaboration creates more value than domination, and that sometimes the most impactful person in the room is the one nobody noticed." I paused, looking at the award in my hands. A year ago, someone told me I was nothing but a worthless assistant. Today, I lead a company that's redefining our industry. The difference between then and now isn't that I suddenly gained value, it's that I finally claimed the value I always had. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for me. It was for everyone who has ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. It was for everyone who knows they're capable of more than others believe they are. As for Garrison Reed, I heard he moved across the country and opened a small consulting firm. Sometimes I wonder if he ever truly understood what happened, how his biggest mistake wasn't throwing that coffee, but failing to see the potential in the people around him. I never sent him that cleaning bill, by the way. Some debts can't be calculated in dollars and cents, and some victories don't need to be rubbed in to be complete. If you've stayed with my story until now, thank you. Perhaps you've been underestimated too. Perhaps you're biding your time, building something in silence while others dismiss your potential. Remember, being underestimated is a gift if you know how to use it. People who don't see your value won't see you coming until it's too late. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And leave a comment about a time when someone underestimated you. I read every one of them. Because unlike some people, I understand that every voice matters, especially the ones others try to silence. This worthless garbage doesn't deserve to speak. His finger jabbed toward me as silence descended across the meeting room. 20 of the most influential business leaders in the region froze, uncomfortable witnesses to my public humiliation. The glossy conference table reflected their stunned expressions as they shifted in their seats. Nobody dared to intervene. Nathaniel, the CEO's son, stood tall in his custom-tailored suit, a smirk playing on his lips as he basked in his perceived untouchability. His father, Edmund, stared at his notes, pretending not to notice his son's behavior. I took a slow, measured breath and met Nathaniel's eyes directly. "That's interesting coming from you." My voice remained steady as I slid a manila folder across the polished surface toward him. Confusion flickered across his face as he flipped it open. The confident smirk evaporated instantly. His face drained of color as he stared at the contents, then back at me with dawning recognition. "Who exactly are you?" he whispered, voice barely audible. I rose from my chair, smoothed my skirt, and addressed the room. "My name is Mirabelle Reed. My grandmother, Virginia Reed, founded this company 60 years ago." The gasp that swept through the boardroom was audible. Edmund's head snapped up, his eyes widening in shock. "And today," I continued, Things are going to change around here. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. Many people hear stories like mine but never engage or subscribe, missing the chance to hear how these situations truly resolve. If my experience resonates with you, please consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads that might help you navigate your own challenging situations. Now, let me take you back to how this all began. 3 months before that fateful board meeting, I joined Ascendant Innovations as an entry-level project coordinator. Despite my qualifications, a master's degree in business development, and 5 years of experience at competing firms, I was relegated to making coffee runs and taking meeting notes. My grandmother Virginia built Ascendant from nothing in the 1960s, working 18-hour days while raising 3 children alone after my grandfather passed away. She was a visionary, creating a company culture decades ahead of its time with profit sharing for employees, flexible work arrangements, and an emphasis on work-life balance that was revolutionary for the era. When she retired 15 years ago, she sold the company to Edmund with specific conditions protecting employees and company values. What most people didn't know was that my mother, Cordelia, inherited a significant portion of voting shares but remained a silent investor, never setting foot in the corporate offices. I grew up hearing stories about Ascendant, how it began at my grandmother's kitchen table, how she fought to be taken seriously in a male-dominated industry, and how she created opportunities for hundreds of families. But in recent years, troubling reports had reached us. Employee satisfaction had plummeted, turnover rates had tripled. The company's charitable foundation had mysteriously reduced its activities. "Something isn't right," my mother had said one evening, reviewing the quarterly reports. "The numbers look good on paper, but these employee surveys tell a different story." That's when we hatched our plan. I would apply for a position under my married name, which was different from my mother's maiden name. I would observe the company culture from within, document any issues, and report back. If things were as bad as we feared, my mother would consider invoking her rarely used veto power over major company decisions. My first day at Ascendant was eye-opening. The warm, collaborative atmosphere my grandmother described had been replaced by competitive tension. People worked in isolation, afraid to share ideas. The open-door policy was gone. Executives worked behind keycard-protected doors on the top floor. Then I met Nathaniel. At 32, he was only 2 years older than me but carried himself with the entitled confidence of someone who'd never faced a meaningful obstacle. As the VP of Operations and the CEO's only son, he was positioned as the company's future. He roamed the office floors like a king surveying his kingdom. "You must be new," he said during my first week, finding me organizing presentation materials in the main conference room. "Make sure the water glasses are filled before the executives arrive." And I take my coffee black, 2 sugars. "I'm actually the new project coordinator," I replied. "Mirabelle." He barely glanced at my extended hand. "Right. Well, the coffee station is down the hall. We still need those waters filled." This became our pattern. Despite my role, Nathaniel would find ways to assign me menial tasks. When I submitted project ideas, they were dismissed without consideration. In meetings, he talked over me or claimed my suggestions weren't ambitious enough for Ascendant's vision. What he didn't know was that I documented everything, every dismissed idea, every instance of taking credit for others' work. Every time he belittled female employees while praising men for identical contributions. Eliza from marketing had created an innovative social media strategy that Nathaniel presented as his own. Tomas from product development was reprimanded for insubordination after questioning the safety testing timeline for a new release. Dozens of small injustices that added up to a company culture my grandmother would have found unrecognizable. I also discovered more serious issues. Financial reports with discrepancies. Company resources diverted to startups mysteriously connected to Nathaniel's college friends. Customer complaints buried rather than addressed. "How are things going?" my mother asked during our weekly check-ins. "Worse than we thought," I admitted. The company values only exist in the employee handbook now. In practice, it's becoming a toxic environment. As weeks passed, I built alliances with other employees who remembered the old ascendant or who simply wanted a more equitable workplace. Daniela from HR shared historical employee satisfaction data showing the decline. Winston from accounting quietly pointed out budget irregularities. Even Edmund's executive assistant, Beatrice, who had worked for my grandmother decades ago, sensed something was wrong but couldn't pinpoint the cause. Virginia would be heartbroken, Beatrice whispered one afternoon, finding me working late. This company was her fourth child. She nurtured it with the same love. What changed? I asked. Edmund was good at first, she said. But when Nathaniel joined 5 years ago, something shifted. Edmund started deferring to him more and more. Now it feels like Nathaniel is really running things and not for the better. I needed concrete evidence before my mother could take action. The quarterly board meeting, where major strategic decisions would be made, presented the perfect opportunity. I prepared a comprehensive market analysis showing how returning to the company's original values could actually increase profitability and market share. The night before the meeting, I carefully organized my presentation and supporting data. I placed a small photograph of my grandmother on my nightstand, a reminder of what I was fighting for. "Wish me luck, Grandma," I whispered before turning out the light. The board meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp. Executives and board members filed in, making small talk as they settled into their seats. I sat quietly at the far end, officially there to take notes. Edmund called the meeting to order, moving through agenda items with practiced efficiency. When Nathaniel rose to present the quarterly strategy, my heart began to pound. I watched in disbelief as he unveiled slides containing my market analysis, the very work he had dismissed weeks earlier when I presented it. He had removed my name and added his own, presenting my research and conclusions as original insights he had developed. "As you can see," he said confidently, "my approach would reposition us advantageously against our competitors." My hand rose almost involuntarily. "Excuse me." All eyes turned to me. Nathaniel's expression darkened. "I believe there's been a mistake," I said. "That analysis was submitted by me last month. I have the original documents with timestamps." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Nathaniel forced a laugh. "I'm not sure what our note-taker is referring to," he said dismissively. "Perhaps she saw early drafts of my work." "That's not true," I insisted, my voice stronger now. "This is my analysis, word for word." That's when it happened. Nathaniel's professional veneer cracked completely. "This worthless garbage doesn't deserve to speak," he shouted, jabbing his finger toward me. And we returned to the moment where our story began, my humiliation followed by my revelation of who I truly was. The contents of the folder I'd slid to Nathaniel contained 3 things: a DNA test confirming my lineage to Virginia Reed, my grandmother's original contract highlighting the ethical conduct clauses, and the board's succession plan naming my mother as emergency controller should the company violate its founding principles. As the board members processed this information, the conference room door opened. My mother, Cordelia Reed, walked in, her first time entering the building in 15 years. The resemblance to my grandmother was striking enough that several older board members audibly gasped. "I believe my daughter has identified some concerns about the company's current direction," she said calmly, taking a seat at the head of the table, the chair Edmund typically occupied. Edmund found his voice first. "Cordelia, this is highly irregular. If you had concerns, proper channels—" "Proper channels?" my mother interrupted. "Like the quarterly reviews you've been sending me with falsified employee satisfaction data? Or the ethical compliance reports that somehow failed to mention the 7 discrimination complaints filed this year alone?" I distributed folders to each board member containing evidence of everything I'd discovered during my 3 months undercover. For the next hour, we methodically walked through the documentation, the toxic management practices, the misallocation of resources, the suppression of innovation, all leading to the company's declining reputation and staff retention problems. Nathaniel sat frozen, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. Edmund alternated between defensive arguments and stunned silence as decades of carefully maintained control slipped through his fingers. "So what happens now?" asked Desiree, the longest serving board member. "Are you invoking your control rights?" My mother looked at me, then back to the board. "That depends on what actions this board is willing to take." What followed was an intense negotiation that lasted well into the evening. Board members stepped out to make phone calls to legal advisors. Preliminary votes were taken. Arguments broke out and were resolved. Through it all, my mother remained calm but unmovable on key points. By 8 p.m., exhausted but determined, we reached an agreement. Edmund would remain CEO, but with significantly reduced autonomy. A new ethics committee would be established with representatives from all levels of the company. My mother would take an active board seat to oversee the transition. And Nathaniel? The room fell silent when my mother outlined his future. "Effective immediately, Nathaniel will be reassigned to our customer service department for 6 months," she announced. "His performance reviews will come directly from the employees he's treated poorly. His future at this company depends entirely on whether he can learn the value of those he called worthless." Nathaniel jumped to his feet. "This is absurd. I have executive experience. You can't possibly expect me to—" "Your other option is resignation," I said quietly, "with no severance and no reference." His face flushed with anger as he looked around the room for allies, finding none. Even his father remained silent, knowing the alternative was losing the company entirely. "Fine," Nathaniel spat. "I'll play your little game, but don't expect me to." "This isn't a game," my mother interrupted. "This is accountability, something this company was founded on, something you'll have the opportunity to learn about from the ground up." As the meeting finally adjourned, board members approached me one by one, some apologetic for never noticing what was happening, others expressing relief that change was coming. I felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication certainly, but also sadness that intervention had been necessary at all. Edmund was the last to leave, pausing at the doorway. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said softly, surprising me. I lost sight of what she built. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing numbers instead of people. When only my mother and I remained, she squeezed my hand. "The hard part starts tomorrow," she warned. "Changing a culture isn't as simple as changing leadership." "I know," I replied, "but it's worth fighting for." Little did I know just how difficult that fight would be, or that our most unexpected ally would emerge from the most unlikely source. The next morning, I arrived at Ascendant headquarters earlier than usual. The building felt different somehow, as if the walls themselves had witnessed yesterday's power shift and were holding their breath to see what happened next. Beatrice was already at her desk, organizing files with renewed energy. "Everyone's talking about what happened," she whispered. "Some are terrified, others are hopeful. A few executives were here until midnight clearing out their offices." Clearing out? I hadn't expected immediate resignations. 3 VPs who were particularly close to Nathaniel. They saw the writing on the wall. Her eyes sparkled with something I hadn't seen before: hope. "Is it true? Are you really Virginia's granddaughter?" I nodded. She clasped my hand. "I've waited 15 years for this day." Word spread quickly. As employees arrived, many stared at me with new interest. Some avoided eye contact entirely. By 9 a.m., my mother had called an all-hands meeting in the atrium. Almost 400 employees gathered, buzzing with speculation. Edmund stood awkwardly beside my mother as she addressed the company. She introduced herself, explained her ownership stake, and outlined the leadership changes that would take effect immediately. "For too long, this company has drifted from its founding values," she said. "Today, we begin the journey back." Then she introduced me. As I stepped forward, I spotted Nathaniel at the back of the room, arms crossed, eyes burning with resentment. "Many of you know me as Mirabelle, a project coordinator who joined 3 months ago," I began. "What you don't know is why I came here." My grandmother founded Ascendant with a vision of what a workplace could be, one where every voice matters, where innovation is celebrated regardless of title, where people are valued above profit margins. I saw nodding heads, particularly among older employees who remembered my grandmother's era. I've worked alongside you, experienced the same frustrations, witnessed the same dismissals of good ideas. Starting today, we're building systems to ensure everyone is heard. I outlined the new ethics committee structure, the anonymous reporting system, and the cultural transformation initiative we'd be launching. As I spoke, I could see hope blooming across many faces. Others looked skeptical, perhaps having heard similar promises before. Change won't happen overnight. I acknowledged. Trust has been broken. It must be rebuilt through consistent action, not just words. I'm asking for your patience, and more importantly, your participation. After the meeting, my new office was flooded with employees sharing stories, suggestions, and in some cases, documentation of past abuses they'd witnessed but been afraid to report. I barely had time to eat that day, listening to person after person who finally felt safe enough to speak. Meanwhile, Nathaniel reported to the customer service floor for his first day in his new role. Petra, the customer service director, was a no-nonsense woman who had survived multiple attempts by Nathaniel to have her department outsourced. "Your training begins today," she told him, handing him a headset. "You'll shadow Kyrie for the morning, then handle calls yourself this afternoon." "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "I have an MBA from—" "That won't help you calm down a customer whose shipment arrived damaged." Petra interrupted. "Here, we value emotional intelligence and problem-solving under pressure. Your education means nothing if you can't connect with people." I received hourly updates about Nathaniel's first day. He removed his headset 3 times during difficult calls. He argued with Petra about proper protocols. By day's end, he had the lowest customer satisfaction rating in department history. "He won't last a week," Daniela from HR predicted during our end-of-day debrief. "He doesn't have a choice," I reminded her. "This is his only path to redemption." The first month was chaotic. Edmund resisted many changes, particularly those requiring greater financial transparency. 2 more executives resigned rather than adapt to the new culture. My mother attended daily leadership meetings, firmly redirecting conversations whenever they veered toward old patterns. I focused on rebuilding the innovation pipeline that had been stifled under Nathaniel's leadership. We created cross-functional teams to evaluate ideas based on merit rather than who proposed them. Within weeks, promising concepts that had been shelved for years were being developed. Eliza from marketing, whose social media strategy Nathaniel had stolen, was promoted to lead our digital transformation initiative. Tomas from product development was given resources to improve safety testing. Small victories accumulated, building momentum. But the real drama unfolded in customer service. Nathaniel's performance remained abysmal. Customers complained about his condescending tone. Colleagues reported his attempts to delegate his tasks. Petra documented every infraction, creating a file thick enough to justify termination. 6 weeks into his reassignment, Nathaniel didn't show up for work. Security cameras showed him entering the executive floor instead, using his still-active keycard. I found him in his father's office, both men looking guilty when I walked in. "This isn't what it looks like," Edmund began. "It looks like you're undermining the board's decision," I said, maintaining calm despite my anger. "It looks like Nathaniel is avoiding his responsibilities." "This punishment has made its point," Nathaniel argued. "I've learned my lesson. I'm ready to return to appropriate work." "What lesson have you learned exactly?" I asked. His answer was revealing: that actions have consequences, that I should be more careful about how I speak to people in public settings. Not that people deserved respect, not that he'd been wrong, just that he should be more cautious about his public behavior. "Your reassignment continues," I said firmly, "and Edmund, the next breach of our agreement will be reported to the board." That evening, I received a call from my mother. "Nathaniel's grandmother is requesting a meeting with us." His grandmother? I didn't realize she was still alive. Very much alive, Imogene Bartlett. She's 85 and apparently still formidable. The name struck a chord in my memory. Wait, wasn't she on the board when Grandma was running the company? Yes, they were friends once before the acquisition. Now she wants to see us tomorrow at her home. The next morning, we drove to an elegant colonial house in the historic district. A housekeeper led us to a sunroom where an elderly woman sat regally in a wingback chair. Despite her age, Imogene's eyes were sharp as they assessed us. "You look just like her," she said to my mother. "Virginia always said Cordelia got her stubbornness. And you," she turned to me, "have her strategist's mind." Infiltrating the company undercover, she would have loved that move. "You knew my grandmother well?" I asked. "We were business partners before we were friends. I was the first investor in Ascendant, back when banks wouldn't lend to a widowed woman with 3 children. She gestured to photos on a side table, younger versions of herself and my grandmother at various company events. "Then why did you support Edmund buying the company?" my mother asked. Imogene sighed. "Virginia was retiring. Your brothers had no interest in the business. You were building your own career. Edmund seemed the best option to maintain Virginia's legacy." Her face hardened. "I never anticipated my grandson would undo so much of what we built. That's why we've intervened," I explained. "By humiliating him publicly and demoting him to answering phones?" Imogene raised an eyebrow. "You've wounded his pride, but have you changed his understanding?" Her question caught me off guard. "What would you suggest?" Nathaniel lacks context. He sees Ascendant as his birthright, not as something built through sacrifice and vision. He needs education more than punishment. She outlined a proposal. Nathaniel would continue working in customer service, but would also spend one evening each week with Imogene, learning the company's true history. She would share original documents, introduce him to retired employees from the early days, and help him understand the values that made Ascendant successful in the first place. "He respects me, even if he respects few others," she said. "Let me try to reach him." My mother and I exchanged glances. "We can add this to his program," I agreed cautiously, "but the customer service requirement stands." "As it should," Imogene nodded. "My grandson needs both the stick and the carrot, I'm afraid." When we informed Nathaniel of this additional requirement, his reaction surprised me. "Grandmother wants to meet with me weekly? About company history?" For the first time, he seemed genuinely intrigued rather than resentful. "She feels you would benefit from understanding Ascendant's origins," I explained. "Fine." He shrugged with feigned indifference. "If that's what it takes to get through this charade." The following weeks brought subtle changes. Nathaniel's customer service performance improved marginally. He stopped arriving late. Petra reported fewer complaints. Most significantly, he began asking questions during training sessions instead of merely enduring them. Meanwhile, company-wide initiatives gained traction. The ethics committee, comprised of employees from every level and department, reviewed policies and practices with fresh eyes. Sales began to rebound as customer satisfaction scores improved. The innovation pipeline filled with promising ideas. Edmund remained a complex figure in this transition. Some days he embraced the changes, acknowledging they were necessary. Other days he resisted, particularly when they reduced his unilateral authority. My mother handled him skillfully, recognizing his pride needed preservation even as his power was checked. 3 months after the board meeting confrontation, we held a company-wide celebration to mark the official relaunch of Ascendant's employee scholarship program, something my grandmother had started, but Nathaniel had quietly defunded years earlier. As I prepared to announce the first recipients, I noticed Nathaniel enter the atrium. He stood at the back, still separate from the group, but present in a way he hadn't been at previous all-hands gatherings. Imogene joined him moments later, patting his arm with grandmotherly affection. After the ceremony, he approached me as I gathered my notes. "My grandmother showed me the original scholarship documents," he said without preamble. Your grandmother personally wrote recommendation letters for every recipient. I nodded. She believed education was the greatest equalizer. She wrote one for my mother, he continued. Did you know that? This was news to me. No, I didn't. My mother was a receptionist here before she married my father. Virginia Reed paid for her to get her accounting degree. His eyes held something unfamiliar, humility, perhaps. I never knew that story. My parents never told me. Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me wondering what other revelations Imogene had shared during their weekly sessions. The next morning, Petra called me directly, her voice tinged with disbelief. You need to come to customer service. Now. I rushed downstairs, imagining the worst. Nathaniel had quit, had a meltdown, insulted a major client. Instead, I found him at his desk, calmly talking a customer through troubleshooting steps for our software. Thank you for your patience, Mrs. Hoffman, he was saying. I know this is frustrating. Let's try one more approach. His tone was patient, empathetic even. When the call ended successfully, he made detailed notes in the system before moving to the next call in queue. He's been like this all morning, Petra whispered. Yesterday too. It's like someone performed an exorcism. I watched him work for several minutes. The transformation wasn't complete. I could still see flashes of frustration, moments where he had to visibly restrain himself from being condescending. But the effort was undeniable. Later that week, I met with Imogene again, curious about what had prompted this change. I showed him the ledgers, she explained, pouring tea. The early years when Virginia took no salary so employees could be paid. The loan she secured using her house as collateral. The acquisition offers she refused because the buyers wouldn't guarantee employee protections. And that affected him? Nathaniel respects builders. He's been raised to value creation and legacy. When he understood what Virginia truly built, and how, it reframed his understanding of the company. She stirred honey into her tea. I also told him about his mother. He mentioned that. What he didn't tell you is how it challenged his worldview. He's always believed success comes from privilege and connections. Learning his own mother rose through merit shook his assumptions. 4 months into our company reformation, Nathaniel's customer service term was approaching its end. The ethics committee would evaluate his performance and make recommendations about his future role. As committee chair, I recused myself from the decision to avoid any appearance of personal vendetta. The morning of their deliberation, I received an unexpected email from Nathaniel requesting a private meeting. Curious, I agreed to see him that afternoon. He arrived at my office precisely on time, more casually dressed than I'd ever seen him in the workplace, khakis and a button-down rather than his usual designer suit. I want to withdraw from consideration for any executive positions, he said immediately after sitting down. What? This was the last thing I expected. The ethics committee is deciding my fate today. I'm removing myself from consideration for any leadership role. Why? He took a deep breath. Because I'm not ready. These past months have shown me how much damage I've done and how much I still have to learn. I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or strategy. What are you proposing instead? I want to create a new role, Community Impact Coordinator. I would work with the ethics committee to rebuild relationships with employees we've lost, clients we've alienated, and community partners we've neglected. The proposal was thoughtful, addressing real needs while keeping him in a position where he could continue learning without direct authority over others. This isn't what I expected from you, I admitted. 4 months ago, I called you worthless garbage, he said quietly. I believed power came from making others feel small. I was wrong. My grandmother and your grandmother both knew better. I'm just starting to understand what they built and why it matters. His words seemed genuine, but I'd been fooled before. The committee will consider your proposal alongside other options. That's all I ask. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. I owe you a public apology. Not because the rules require it, but because it's right. The next day at the all-hands meeting, Nathaniel requested time to speak. Edmund looked nervous. My mother watched with guarded curiosity. The room fell silent as he took the microphone. 4 months ago, I publicly humiliated Mirabelle Reed in the boardroom, he began. I called her worthless garbage and attempted to silence her contributions. I was wrong. Not just because she turned out to be the founder's granddaughter, though that certainly made my behavior even more foolish, but because no one deserves to be treated that way. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I've spent these months learning what Ascendant was built to be and how far I helped drive it from that vision. I've heard your stories of ideas dismissed, contributions stolen, and talents wasted. For my role in creating that culture, I apologize. He continued, outlining specific changes he'd witnessed in himself and the company. The speech wasn't perfect. At times, his privilege still showed through, but it was unmistakably sincere. When he finished, Imogene was the first to applaud, followed gradually by others. Not everyone joined. Some wounds were too fresh, some skepticism too deep, but it was a beginning. The ethics committee announced their decision the following day. Nathaniel would not return to executive leadership. Instead, they approved his community impact coordinator role with a 1-year probationary period and quarterly reviews. 6 months after my confrontation in the boardroom, Ascendant had transformed. Employee retention improved 40%. Innovation flourished. The company culture began reflecting my grandmother's original vision, not perfectly, but genuinely. Edmund announced his retirement. Effective the following year, the board would conduct an external search for his replacement, with my mother leading the selection committee. As for Nathaniel, his transformation continued unevenly but consistently. He worked alongside employees he'd once dismissed, learning from their expertise. The Community Impact Initiative gained traction, rebuilding relationships he'd damaged. During the company's annual charity gala, I found myself alone with him on the terrace, both of us taking a break from the crowded ballroom. Your grandmother would be proud, he said, echoing his father's words from months earlier. You've restored her legacy. We've restored it, I corrected. All of us together. No, you did something more important, he insisted. You could have destroyed me, exposed everything publicly, forced me out completely. It would have been justified after how I treated you and others. That wasn't the goal. I know that now. Real power isn't about crushing opponents. It's about transformation. He looked out at the city lights. My grandmother tells me Virginia used to say, when you have the power to destroy someone but choose to educate them instead, you create an ally rather than a casualty. I smiled, hearing my grandmother's wisdom. That sounds like her. I'm still learning, he admitted. Some days are harder than others, but I want you to know, that meeting where you revealed yourself, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it felt like the worst day of my life at the time. 1 year after I walked into Ascendant as an undercover project coordinator, I stood on the stage at our annual employee summit, looking out at faces that now reflected engagement rather than resignation. My grandmother built this company on a radical idea, I told them, that businesses could prioritize people and still be profitable, that innovation comes from valuing every voice. That leadership means lifting others up, not stepping on them to rise higher. In the front row sat my mother, alongside Imogene. Edmund was there too, more relaxed in semi-retirement. And Nathaniel, no longer the entitled executive, but a valued team member who had earned respect rather than demanded it. The transformation we've achieved together proves my grandmother right, I continued. Our employee satisfaction scores have reached historic highs. Our innovation pipeline is overflowing with ideas from every level of the company. Our profits have increased, not despite our ethical focus, but because of it. I revealed our newest initiative, the Virginia Reed Innovation Center, which would provide resources for employees to develop new ideas during paid work hours. The room erupted in applause. As I concluded my speech, I reflected on the journey. My revenge against Nathaniel hadn't been about destroying him or even punishing him, though he certainly deserved consequences. The true revenge was transforming the company back into what my grandmother intended, forcing those who had corrupted her vision to witness its restoration and eventually participate in it. Seeing Nathaniel become an advocate for the very values he once undermined wasn't a consolation prize, it was the ultimate victory. The entitled executive who had called me worthless garbage now understood the true worth of every person in the organization. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation, not just of circumstances, but of people. My grandmother understood that 60 years ago when she built a company on respect and inclusion. I understood it now, watching her legacy flourish again. If you've stayed with me through this story, I hope it inspires you to consider how you might transform the challenging relationships in your own life. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are capable of the greatest growth, if we're brave enough to show them a better path. Please share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about turning conflict into positive change. The most powerful legacy we can create is teaching others to see the worth in every person they encounter, even those they once dismissed as worthless.